Humans of the cardboard. Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. We've got more Cyberstorm Access news here. We've got a new DESPIA SYNCHRO monster. We're just doing anything we want here, right? Like stuff that doesn't make sense in our archetype, but I guess lore-wise it'll make sense. I don't really follow the lore for the albaz stuff, just not my cup of tea, but obviously a lot of people do, so I'm sure it has some cool connotations there. But yeah, Despian Lulu Walilith, crazy name also. This is all one word, by the way, Lulu Walilith. Crazy. Let's get into it. This card is a light spellcaster synchro effect monster. It's level 12 synchro. 25-25, actually relatively small for a level 12 synchro, for sure, but because of how a lot of the albaz cards work, they need to have this card needed to have a 2500 stat line, at least in one of its categories. It would have been cool if it was like 35-25, 4025, but it is what it is. This card is almost entirely generic, but it does require a level 4 tuner, plus one or more non-tuners. So this the whole albaz lore does have a couple of level 4 tuners. We'll talk about those after we finish talking about this card, but yeah, pretty interesting there. You can only use the second effect of this card's name once per turn. First effect, not a hard once per turn, by the way. Once per turn, if a card or cards leaves their extra deck. Now, I'm assuming this means if just an extra deck monster is summoned, that counts as an extra deck monster, or a card leaving the extra deck. I'm assuming a pendulum summon counts, as long as you're summoning something from face up extra. I'm assuming that stuff counts. Or, I mean, for other instances, stuff like, for example, Kashtiri Unicorn ripping a card from your opponent's extra deck, I believe, would also trigger this card. So just keep all that stuff in mind. You can so if that happens, any card, by the way, this is any card leaves any extra deck. That means you summon from the extra deck. That means your opponent summons from the extra deck. This card will trigger. You can make all face-up monsters you currently control gain 500 attack. So that kind of helps with us thinking this monster is a little smaller than it could have been. Then you can negate the effects of one face-up card on the field until the end of this turn. So that's really cool. It's any face-up card as well, so there could also be applications where you're able to negate spells and traps in the same chain link before they resolve, which is pretty cool. As well as the fact that pretty much what this is like, imagine your opponent summons from the extra deck, right? They go, and let's say it's a monster that has an effect on summon. They go monster effect. But then you go chain link 2 on this card because their monster just left their extra deck and made it to the field. You can then gain, stats and then also negate that face-up card so it does not get its effects. That's pretty cool. It's actually a decent interruption. You can trigger it yourself as well. I like that it negates any card as well. So there could be applications where we're negating field spells, negating continuous cards, all that stuff. We'll take it. We'll definitely take it. And the second effect, during the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard because it was sent there this turn, that is such a good generic float. You can special summon a light spellcaster from your hand or deck whose attack equals its own defense. We'll also look at those targets as well. That's a pretty good float. The only complaint you could ever have with this float effect really is that it's on end phase. You don't get it immediately, but that's pretty fair because of how generically this floats and it summons from deck. I know there's only a few targets that are light spellcaster with the exact same attack and defense, but we'll talk about that in a sec. So before we talk about the rest here, I think it's a good card. I mean, it's got an interruption. That's one thing you could say about, listen, it's not a Despian fusion. So Despia isn't getting this out quite as easily, but we'll talk about another card that actually will probably abuse this card, maybe even a little bit more, or at least more often. But it is an interruption, not a bad interruption at all. Also, the float effect is really, really nice. So even as a send target straight from extra, this card could also come up for that as well. Now, getting to a card I want to mention here, we've talked about this card quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, but Grand Guignol, the Finale Dragon, is a really cool card. When it's fusion summon, it sends any level 6 or higher light or dark monster from deck to grave, so really good foolish effect on summon, as well as this. If a monster or monsters is special summoned by an opponent's activated monster effect, you can banish this card from field or graveyard, so you don't even have to summon this card if you could just get it sent to grave. Special summon a Dogmatica monster from the deck, or a Despia monster from your extra deck. Not a Despia fusion. It is any Despia monster. And you know what's interesting? Proskenion, technically an interruption, but it's not an interruption that is going to come up versus 1, every matchup, and 2, earlier in turns. You're going to have to let your opponent play just for that effect to even be live. So not as good. This card, however, is just a negate as soon as your opponent tries to summon from the extra deck. So this card is actually an interruption. It also floats, and not only does it float, but to even play Grand Guignol, you're also probably playing Cartesia, and Cartesia is one of the float targets of this card. So it really, really has a lot of really good synergy. Speaking of which, let's move to some of the summonable float targets off of the new Despian monster, because it's any light spellcaster whose attack equals its defense. I like that it can summon from hand or decks. Even if you draw some of these, you can still pull them out of the hand if they're one-ofs. But yeah, Cartesia, awesome. You pull it out, then you have a quick fusion, as well as the fact that it floats as well. So really, really good, and it can get you into Grand Guignol, and that can get you back into another copy of Lulu Lilith. Jesus. Yeah, pretty cool there. Next up, you have Dogmatica Ecclesia the Virtuous. Also pretty good. I mean, just being able to summon off of this and either get, whatever you want. Punishment, Fleur-de-Lis, or Maximus, whichever one is best in that scenario or you're willing to play. Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous, also another interesting one. Keep in mind, also one other thing, Blazing Cartesia and Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous, both level 4 tuners. So yeah, these are probably the best 2 cards that allow you to get into that card the hard way instead of cheating it out with Grand Guignol. But yeah, the Virtuous, really cool here because this can cheat you into a Sword Soul or a Fallen of Albaz on the opponent's turn, both of which could be playable. I don't think you really want to, well, not even on the opponent's turn. You can do it whenever, during the main phase. So if it's during your opponent's turn, you're probably not trying to go into a Sword Soul monster, but if it's your opponent's turn, you might try to go into the last target here, which is actually the Iris Sword Soul, because this card just says if your opponent summons from extra deck, you can just destroy one of the special summon monsters. Cool. If they special summon from hand, you can special summon a monster from your hand, but if they summon from deck, you just draw 2 cards. It's pretty good value. This card's pretty cool. Maybe it could be a one-off if you're trying to play both of these cards, but I understand if you're not, because you can also just do Ecclesia into Albaz as well for a quick kind of like super poly effect. They can respond to it, but it's still a pretty powerful interruption nonetheless. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. This is a very, very interesting card. Like I said, because it's a 12 and it requires a level 4 tuner, it's not as easy to make. And I don't think it's quite strong enough if we're making it that way. If we're maybe I guess if you're making it with a level 8 fusion that's going to float and get you another resource in grave, plus you're doing maybe you're using Cartesia or regular Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous to synchro with a level 8 fusion that's going to float when it hits grave. And then because a fusion was sent, both of these cards would add themselves back to the hand. So you're kind of getting them back. You're going to get another resource off the fusion. And then you're also getting this card, which is an interruption and also floats. I guess that could be worth. But I don't know. I'll still have to sit back and see how easily this card synergizes with the deck overall. Otherwise, I think the really, really cool factor is definitely the Grand Guignol float. I've talked about this, Quaritas, okay, and also Proskenion, okay, but they're not legit interruptions summoned off of this card if you were able to trigger it on your opponent's turn, whereas this card feels wow, that's a legit board presence, that's a legit interruption your opponent has to worry about, and that's some really good value, especially with the float effect thrown in there as well. So very, very cool applications there. That's everything I saw from this card. Obviously, if I missed anything, please let me know as far as it pertains to how this card could and would be utilized in whether it's a DESPIA deck, a branded deck, even more so focused, or some other deck. Let me know your thoughts down below, because I'm really interested in this stuff. I'm really excited to mess around with like decks that can utilize Cartesia and Grand Guignol, and even the new Fusion monster that just came out as well. But we'll talk more about that later on. But thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, let me know your thoughts down below on this card. And like I said, anything I might have missed, subscribe if you have not yet and you want to see more stuff from your boy down the line. And I'll see you in the next one. Still got over 30 cards to go for this set, and I'll definitely bring those to you whenever they drop. So catch you in the next one. Peace.